Their city council meeting for April 9th, 2018. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I like that race to the start, yeah.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Kurtzwell.
Yes, I'd like to note for the record that Mr. Richards is now approaching the council table, but has not taken his seat at the start of the meeting.
Are you going to let us know when he does take his seat?
Let the roll call show that everyone is present. We will move on to the approval of the minutes from March 26, 2018.
Mr. Mayor, I have one thing.
Councilmember Friesian, go ahead.
On page 3, it's the second sentence, starting with Attorney Wilhelm. It should be stated, S-T-A-T-E-D.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I forwarded a number of comments to council regarding changes that I think are needed with respect to the 326 minutes. Does anybody want to go through those, or?
Councilmember Kurtzwell.
Yes, the Open Meetings Act does require all changes made to the minutes be placed on the record.
I'll say something.
Council like me to go through these?
If you wouldn't mind, if you have a copy of them verbatim, that'd be great.
All right, on page 5, new business item number 4, council motion 3818. The vote on the matter should be included in the minutes. My recollection is that it was approved unanimously. Page 6, council motion 31118. The vote should be included. I believe it was approved unanimously. Also, I would ask that or suggest that the motion under the CM heading be revised to state motion to approve the revised Plant Moran engagement letter and addendum and authorize the clerk to sign it. 6, council motion 31218, motion to approve the memorandum of understanding with POAM. Pat Aseltine's name is misspelled. It's Aseltyne. The vote on this motion is not included and should be added. My notes indicate that it was passed unanimously. Page 9, item 7, capital Roman 7, closed session. The motion should be revised. There looks like there was some duplicate numbering with respect to council motion 312. Previous motion, so this should be council motion 31318. It should be revised to match the language from the agenda. Motion to enter into closed session to section 8H of the Open Meetings Act, MCL 15.268 sub H, to consider and discuss written attorney-client privilege communication on legal issues related to a personnel matter, which is exempt from disclosure under MCL 15.243 1G of the FOIA. Also, the motion, the next motion in the minutes on page 9 should be council motion 31418, and that is relating to directing the city attorney. The vote on this motion is not included and should be added. Does anybody recall? I didn't have notes at that point, and I've not reviewed the video. But that vote should be reflected. And the motion to, the vote on the motion to adjourn should be council motion 315, and the vote should be added. That's all of my suggested changes and comments.
Thanks, Tim. Carl, did you have something you wanted?
Yes, I just want to mention, Tim, I got everything that you wanted to get to me, okay? And I recall the last conversation we had after the last meeting outside. You thought it was a good idea to use email, and this is the first time we did it, okay? And I guess it worked out okay, and I read every line, okay, in this deal, okay? Most of it appears to me is just it's already been decided, and we've already gone over it. However,
Is this about the minutes?
Are you talking about the minutes, Carl?
yeah, the minutes, but I just wish you'd have called me or send me a text message. Something's coming, Carl. I might not have been home. It's a possibility. Okay, I might have had to go to the doctor or some darn thing. I might not have been there. The police officer, Baki delivered it to me. We sat and talked for a while, but I'm glad I got it, okay? But just let me know what's coming, okay? The next time. Text
Happy to
message.
do whatever I can to make sure you get the information in a timely manner.
Okay.
Thanks, Tim. Did anyone have anything else to add to the minutes?
I move the minutes as amended.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? So we will do the approval of the city bills.
Okay. I got a bunch of them.
Councilmember Kennedy?
Just one question here on page 3 of 5, where we have the invoice from McCarter for roofing the rental property. So the actuals came in at 20% over the allocation because of the condition of the wood and everything else. And obviously, it's a done deal. We've incurred it. My question is anybody now looking at what the rental cost should be for that house going forward?
There was a recommendation made. I had asked Mr. Donahue if he could reach out to a realtor, and Abe Ayub, he had mentioned it at our last meeting, that suggested that it should be in the range of, was it 12 to 1,500 a month would be the market value rental.
So the question, I guess, becomes, what do we need to do to move forward from that position?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Kurtzwell?
Why don't you just put that on the agenda for the next meeting for discussion?
Okay.
Okay. Just for information, I talked to Mr. De La Rosa, the tenant who lives there, and he intends to, if everything works out right, he plans to move in a year, I believe he indicated. And so you might take that into consideration. Okay, and he's been a great tenant for a good number of years. And he does quite a few things around there himself and pays for it. So I'm sure everything's going to work out. So, for the best. That's all I want to say on that.
Councilmember Kurtzwell, go ahead.
This is on the city bills that were presented, and I just want to make sure I have this right. Lloyd, I looked on the payroll report. I just want to make sure that I read this right. The wages that you received at the end of March of 2018, that was $13,902.
I believe that's the number that's there. I haven't calculated it out, but it should equate to 125% of my normal pay.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I understand this. So if I extrapolate that out for 12 months, that's roughly $168,000 in wages to you.
No,
you were in it.
if it multiplies out to that amount would not be correct.
Well, what's changing? I mean, you're still the interim city manager, so you're collecting your original paycheck and plus the stipend. So that's probably averaging out about $14,000 a month.
I'd have to go back and calculate it. I haven't done so.
Yeah, that's about, it comes out, if nothing changes, if everything is constant, nothing changes, you will be paid about $168,000 this year. And that doesn't include your vacation buyout. That puts you over $200,000. Thank you.
Right, that won't be correct.
Yeah, that would be correct,
Figure it
yeah.
out.
Yeah, one individual, $200,000 in the city. Okay,
No,
thank you.
what I'm saying is, there's no way that I will be receiving that amount of money.
Well, I mean, you're here on the payroll. I'm just looking out till the end of December. I don't see you going anywhere. Thank you.
Does anyone else have anything for the city bills before we move on to the, go ahead, Councilmember Richards.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. On the first page, revenue report to City of South Lyon. I didn't get to City Hall today. Lori's not there on Mondays. I totaled the column up on the last, next to the last here, where the abnormal balances are put in parentheses. And I got a projected savings, or a projected overrun of $54,680. $54,680. No, 89, excuse me. Okay. All right. Now, what I don't understand is this projected savings that's coming in, or projected extra money over budget on paper, or is this real dollars on hand that's coming in? And if so, where does it go? Does it go to general fund or just what?
Who are you directing your question?
Okay, I don't know, Chief, you might not be able to answer it.
Well, tax revenue would go to the general fund.
Okay, then, that's a good-sized chunk of money, and it totals, that's extra money that's coming in on that column. I totaled it all up, 54,689. Okay, and
That would be money that's been collected as of March 31st of this year,
okay,
as compared to the budgeted amount.
okay. Can we spend that money, or has it got to sit in general fund? Can we put that in another area if we so choose?
Council can decide to allocate budget funds however council sees fit.
Okay, learning experience, okay, but I noticed this, and I'm asking you and anybody else, if we've got some extra money, then we should be taking note of it and using it for a necessary cause somewhere. That's all I'm saying,
Yeah.
Chief.
Carl, do you think this is something better for
Yeah,
our budget?
point of
meeting
order.
next week?
This is, talk
Okay.
about that at the budget, not in the bills.
All right, but okay, I went through every line and every page on that, and I just thought that was worth mentioning. Okay, that's it.
Does anyone have anything else for the city bills before we move on to the
I
attorney
move the
bills?
bills.
Okay.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
All opposed?
No,
Okay, moving on to the city attorney bills. Does anyone have anything to comment on that?
Page 14.9.
Councilmember Kurtzwell.
I just had one question. Tim, this is on page 10. It's dated 2/20/2018. It's investigation regarding Freedom of Information Act request to Police Department, correspondence to clerk regarding the same. What was that about?
It's about Freedom of Information Act.
What was the FOIA request about?
I don't know off the top of my head.
You don't recall? What about on 2/21? That would be the next day. Attention to Freedom of Information Act. Question on rules and policies. Does that help refresh your memory? Let's look at 2/22. That's the next day after that. Correspondence to Police Department regarding Freedom of Information Act request. Do you recall who you corresponded with?
If you'll give me a moment, I'll see if I can find the notes.
Okay, thank you.
This This is related to a Freedom of Information request from a resident.
Okay. And who did you correspond to? 222, correspondence to Police Department. Who was the-
Lieutenant Sovic.
Who?
Lieutenant Sovic.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councilmember Richards, go ahead.
Tim, on page 13 and 14, under subtotal where it says personnel, and it started at 2/7/18, and on page, went to page 14 and went to 2/28/2018. I got to commend you on your
13.
starting on page 13 and then page 14. I got to commend you on how neatly you presented this and totaled it up separately at 10.30 hours, okay? But I just want to make sure I'm clear on this. Was this all under our normal retainer with your company, or was this, any of this extra hours?
We've been treating all of the personnel time as general retainer time, because there is a provision in the retainer agreement that personnel would be called out at a separate hourly rate.
Okay, all
Given
right.
the constraints that the city's in, that we're going to include that in your general retainer work.
Okay, I thought it was one thing to make clear, and that's all I had.
Anyone else have anything? Motion to move the bills here?
I'll move the bills.
Well, we already paid the
Attorney.
bills. I mean,
Attorney
This is part of them.
invoices.
Restate it?
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
No?
Moving on to the approval of the agenda this evening. I know we do have,
Mr. Mayor,
go ahead, Chief.
I would request the addition of an old business item number 5, which would be the first reading of the ordinance to amend the official zoning map, rezoning the property located at 500 Stryker. New information on that project came in from CIB Planning only today.
Ms. Will.
We do have Kelly McIntyre from CIB Planning, but Carmen Evantini is planning on being here. He has another meeting he is attending and will come here after he's done with his other meeting. I just want to make the council aware that there may be a request to be flexible on exactly when that matter is heard to allow Mr. Evantini to appear and participate.
Okay. Does anyone else have a problem with that? Okay.
well, I moved the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
No?
At this point, we'd like to welcome public comment. Please state your name and address. I would also say if you are here to mention or talk about something on the agenda, this would be your time to get up as well.
Wait, Mr. Mayor, can I clarify something?
Go ahead.
So if you speak at public comment and then an agenda item comes up, you can't also speak to the agenda item? Is that?
Well, I think we have a meeting on Wednesday where we're going to be addressing that. And I've been trying to set a standard where our public comment will be at the beginning of the meeting.
Okay.
So we're going to stick with that tonight,
Perfect.
okay?
Thanks.
How you doing, council members?
Good.
I live in Northville Township. I do not live in the city. But my name is Ken Hamblin. I live at 68646 6 Mile Road, Northville, Michigan. For those of you that don't know me, I am the owner of 5H Farms. I've been farming the city property for 6 years now. My contract is up as of 2016. I also farmed it in 2017. I was looking for some extra farmland when the park property was brought to my attention. So we proceeded to figure out a way to farm the vacant property that was used in the year 2000s for a dumping site for leaves. and the thought was to eventually sell compost. Well, that didn't fly with the residents, so that was axed. So we made up an agreement, a maintenance agreement, to start cleaning up the property from the debris that was left behind and saplings and obnoxious weeds to prepare the land back to its original use at my expense so it could be farmed once again. An agreement was for all the maintenance I did, and I bared the expense. It was able to be farmed, the land was able to be farmed again. That was my repayment for all of my long hours and my efforts. So I would like to propose a new lease agreement to keep the maintenance up. I ask this in behalf of the residents that live around the park and myself, because rumor has it the city wants to use the property once again for leaf dumping. So on my behalf, it seems to me that was a big waste of my time and my money to help the city beautify that piece of property back to what it was at one particular time. Therefore, if the city starts dumping there again, you're going to see more than just leaves, because everyone is going to see a free dump site. So they will take advantage of it, and after a while, you will also see partying going on by young kids, saplings and obnoxious weeds again in bushes. Please, council, consider that piece of property a sacred piece of ground and not a dumping site. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Council. Ryan Cottingham with Witches Hat Brewing Company, 601 South Lafayette. I'm here today to speak against the new proposed liquor license ordinance that you have a second reading for tonight. I've been up here several times, as many of you know, as this process has been going on. I guess I'm very concerned, maybe not concerned, but just upset that the city is spending resources and time pursuing a problem that it doesn't have. And I say that because everything in this packet is already regulated. It's already covered by different agencies to the line. I was very disappointed to see that the same ordinance was brought up again. It seemed like there was a discussion of involving businesses and getting this document closer to mirroring what state law is, and it just doesn't. It still incorporates microbreweries in with Class Cs, which is not a thing. They're different classes per the MLCC. We're a wholesale manufacturer. Class Cs are on-premise retail. They're apples and oranges, and this lumps them in together. To me, there are so many things in this document that go above and beyond what state law already regulates to death, and they do a very good job at it. Even down to special license permits, so Pumpkin Fests and Blues, Brews, and Brats and things like that, nonprofits that pull temporary one-day liquor licenses, according to this document, would have to go through this entire process. Special permits, as in outdoor service permits, which we do. So you can't even say that because we're already in existing businesses that we're exempt from so many of these things, because we pull temporary outdoor permits. We have outdoor festivals. We tie in with charities, and we give a lot of money back to these charities and to town, and we raise food. And this is a whole nother process, a whole nother step. And also, city already grants its approval on these things. Chief Collins has to sign off on every single one. It's already there. I appreciate that you're trying to handle this like this, and I'm 100% okay with it. I believe I've spoken my piece. I wish I could get involved in more debate on this. And to be honest, I wish the city would have involved us business owners more in working on this to achieve the goal, rather than bringing up the same language that wasn't passed before and trying to push it through. So I'm going to keep it short. I'm just against this. It's not pro-business. It is anti-business. and all for the scope, which I understand the scope of trying to protect your Class C and keeping it in town. I get that. So just do that.
Right.
Don't do everything else. It doesn't make sense. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ray.
That'll do it for public comment tonight. We'll move on to discussion of the downtown. Mr. Donahue?
As always, the report, which was given to Lloyd, there's a copy on your desk there. I'd like to go over a couple items quick, but do you have any comments before? Anything? Okay. The second item, continued discussion with building owners and potential new retailers. I've had a lot of activity, which is typical in the spring. We're going to be putting together a vacant building and lease space showcase, hopefully sometime in May. And I'll be working with the 4 properties right on that are commercial and then 2 office properties. So we'll have more about that at the next council meeting. There's a lot of discussion with 2 new potential wine bars that have come onto the scene in the last 2 weeks. Just met with one at 6 o'clock today. So by hook or by crook, we may get a wine bar soon. I've had a lot of meetings the last 2 weeks with Farmers Market Manager, looking for a lot of improvements at the Farmers Market this year. In fact, at the next council meeting on April 23rd, we're going to talk about expanding the farmers market area and some more improvements. So that'll be exciting. And the last item is that also at the April 23rd meeting, hope to have a recommendation from the DDA at their meeting this week on the 12th for criteria and guidelines and an application for the not only the new over-the-road banner that we'll have, those poles were put up last November, but for using the banners on the light poles. So we'll have a policy available. That's all we have. Any questions?
Councilmember Parisian?
I have 2 questions for you, Bob.
Sure.
The first one is regarding Ladies' Night Out. So is this like we did it in the fall, where it's a big shebang where we have all the businesses involved, or how is this going about?
This is
Start promoting
a group of businesses that wanted to go on their own.
Okay.
Because we're trying to upgrade how we approach events if the DDA or the city are involved. I actually recommended against not doing it without what I feel is enough planning. The event last November was very successful. We had 3 to 4 months to plan that. And we also had money available in the DDA's budget for that. Because of the timing, we weren't able to really plan it. And so I don't like to see us create expectations that we can't meet with a high quality. I think they will have a good event, but I had real problems with the DDA's involvement if we couldn't do it at least as well as we did last time.
So I guess my question is, and that's a totally fair response, because these businesses are putting their own money forward, are we as a city, can we advertise for them, like posting it on the website?
No question. I mean, I post things on Facebook and no problem. And I've
good
given
about
them
that.
advice and I'll work with them, but I think they need to realize that we need to do better planning for major events in the future, but by all means support them and any business that wants to have their own event.
Perfect, thank you.
Councilmember Kurtzwell?
Did you have any input on the website in the section Economic Development?
Yes, for quite a few months I was not given any access to that site, but yes, I was able to put content in there.
Did you provide the picture?
No.
Do you know who did?
I have no idea.
Well, I'm going to give it to you because it has what's called a watermark on it. And a watermark on a photograph denotes that you don't have the licensing rights to use that photograph.
Yes.
And when you subscribe and purchase the licensing rights, then the watermark is taken off and you license the photograph for whatever period of time. So the city, clearly this is a watermark. This was brought to my attention. and I'll provide it to you, so.
Yeah, I had nothing to do with that, but I know who did.
Let's just take care of the problem.
Sure.
I'm just letting the city know that you got to be careful when you go onto the internet and look for photographs to put on your website, whatever. So I would suggest that get taken down immediately, maybe tomorrow. And just remember that if you're putting stuff on there, that you either get a license to post it, or you take your own photograph and then you'll have the copyright yourself. So, and that was brought to my attention by a photographer who was quite upset because it wasn't his photograph, but
Sure.
he understands the how precious and valuable photographs are, or graphic artists who actually do that. So, but, thank you.
Sure.
Glenn, go first.
Yeah.
Councilmember Kivel, go ahead.
I wanted to say I've been enjoying your downtown South Lyon comments on Facebook. I did want to make a little correction. You have an explanation on the tavern's facade, the window facade thing.
Right.
You make a reference to the custom windows from Pullum, and although they are custom windows, they're much the same. They're by a company called Quaker, the same company that the contract that we had approved for the police department and SLARA. That was the manufacturer of the contract that was approved, that was subsequently changed into Pullum actually making their product to put in there. So
Okay. I knew Charlie was supplying the windows. I didn't know where they came from other than that.
yeah.
But I'll gladly change that.
I mean, they are custom windows. They're simply not manufactured by us. That's all.
Great.
Councilmember Richards, you had something?
Yeah, several things, okay. First of all, 110 Detroit, okay. At one time, Providence was interested years ago in buying that property, okay. But the owner wouldn't sell, okay. Providence isn't Providence anymore. It's Ascension. And everybody's paycheck reads Ascension. And I asked, they own the building and the business and the whole works shebang. I asked them, are you guys interested in purchasing 110 Detroit Street right next door? Because Providence was. And they researched it and they said Ascension is not interested in buying that property. And that's the answer I got. But they are going to make some changes inside. Next thing I want to mention is the 117, what is it, Lake Street, 125 and 131, okay? On Monday night, or maybe it was Tuesday night, the big windstorm, Mr. Holden left the keys in the lift up there, and we left them in there, but somebody could have got it. But the next night, when I was up there, there was a crowbar and some other tools, so I took the crowbar home because it was a valuable piece of equipment. I said, oh, I'm going to return this to him tomorrow if he's up here with his crew. And I did. Mr. Holden was up there working alone, and I returned his crowbar, and we talked for over a couple hours. And I wound up helping him on the job, okay, move the big lift truck around to the side and place it. And he showed me the exact formation of the gables that they put up there, how they raised them, and the time it took to have them manufactured. It was 6 weeks, I believe. Each one of those is custom done. And then his crew put them up in there, okay? Now they're painting them, and the interior work he didn't want to show me, okay? But I ain't got no business really inspecting them. I'm not a building inspector, but I wanted to be at the property and talk to Mr. Holden. And he's doing a good job, and he's very excited about it. And we talked about the hotel too, but that's a different subject. Anyway, it's going to look great. I'm in favor of it, and I hope everybody else is. Now, the last one you mentioned, working on the criteria guidelines for the over-the-road banners. This is DDA funded, right? Is that what you said?
Well, the DDA paid for the poles, but I believe that any criteria in the application would be approved by the DDA and then recommended by the DDA to the city council for approval.
But they're not paying out of their money, which is a lot more than some of the rest in their budget. They're not paying for that? They're just paying for the polls?
Anyone that would put up a banner would have to apply and pay for their own banner.
Okay, all right. That wasn't clear, I just thought I'd mention it.
Sure.
That's it.
Does anyone else have anything for Mr. Donahue this evening?
No.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. We'll move on to old business number 2. Consider second reading of liquor license ordinance. Councilmember Parisian.
Well, first things first, I wanted to first mention the website isn't correct with the agendas. So on February 26, 2018, it has today's agenda on there. So I don't know exactly who would handle adjusting that, but just to get it accurate, we need to update and make sure that everything looks correct. The other thing I wanted to mention was I take issue with a few things in this ordinance. So if you turn to, let's see, we're looking at the draft of 122.18. Under application, there's the written statement as to the character, experience, and financial ability.
Page 5.
Okay. Okay.
Oh, I see.
I take issue with that one. I take issue with the 3 written references, identifying the source of all the funds. There's another one regarding the management operations of the proposed establishment. I personally, there's a few things that I think should definitely be in there. Absolutely, we should make sure that the business that's applying for the license doesn't owe taxes to the city. Of course, that's a given. We should protect ourselves in that sense. But there's a couple things that I think are just excessive, that are burdens to our business owners or to new applicants. I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of a business that's applying for a license. If they're already applying through the state has a very rigorous investigation that they already have to conduct. So the application process, the investigation, the fingerprints through the state is just phase 1. Phase 2 for the city doesn't need to be as rigorous, in my opinion. So that's a couple things that I take issue with. And then also, there's a written statement explaining in detail how the application and the applicant meet the review criteria. I don't know what that means. A written statement explaining in detail how the application and the applicant meet the review criteria listed in subsection F.
The last line on page 5.
The way that I read that is telling me if I'm an applicant, I also need to fill out something saying that I meet the criteria for the application.
Which are listed on page 7 and 8.
That seems excessive to me. But that's my opinion. I think that we do need the checks and balances. We do need certain things that are in here are fine, but I take issue with the financial status. That's something that's already checked by the state. The applicant's history and experience. I don't want to say no to a rookie. If an entrepreneur comes in and says, hey, I'm starting a business, I know it's risky, but if they're willing to open up a business in our downtown, that's just one more business we have that we should support. So there's a few things that, to me, seem excessive, somewhat intrusive, and other things that I do support. So I guess, for me, it's a tough decision.
Mr. Wellham.
If I may. Councilmember Parisian raises fine points. The idea here is to try and hit on criteria that I think would come up in the normal course of a discussion with someone looking to get a license. I think you're going to ask the question, so you're going to do this rehab and open this business and employ people, buy inventory, and you don't have a job, you're unemployed, where are you going to get the money? We're going to grant you this license that has, we're in this process statutorily. You have to get our approval. This is value to our community. We want to keep these licenses here. Give them approve them for people that we think are the most, have the best chance of providing that service to the public in our community, I think those are the types of questions that are going to come up. And that's really what this list is designed to do, is to require that applicant to provide that information up front rather than waiting to have to dig it out. Tell them, no, I want you to come back another meeting and give me your financial information or explain it to me. Tell them up front, this is what we're going to look at. That's really what this is. Put people on notice. These are our criteria. I don't know. You are the policymakers as a legislative body. You get to decide what's in this and what's not. I can give you a rationale for why I included it and drafted it that way. And this ordinance is certainly not the only one in Southeast Michigan that has that type of criteria that are looked at.
Councilmember Friesen, go ahead.
And I completely understand your reasoning 100%, and I see the reasoning that behind that. It would behoove the city to take those extra measures. I just think if I put myself in the shoes of a business owner, I feel restricted. Not only do I have to apply for this state license, which is quite rigorous, and state law specifically only states that they need to have a recommendation from the legislative body of a local government unit. So they don't need this rigorous process. In fact, there's a worksheet that's attached to this packet that requires the approval of the city. So why couldn't we just ask the questions instead of just saying, hey, you have to be doing all these things?
That's fine. The reason this is done this way is because you're the first stop. As the local government, they're going to get they have to produce everything to you and get your approval before they can go even apply to the MLCC. So the MLCC is going to do what it does. If they grant them the license, then your approval is already gone. If that's the way this board, this council wants to do that, that's fine. I tend to, from my perspective, think you ought to be, if it's something the state is going to ask, it's pretty easy for them to provide it to you as well. I don't think this is over and above. I don't think this is unreasonable. These are things that anybody with a business plan is going to have to assemble in order to start a business. If you want to back off and say, we're going to just give this a cursory review and let the state do its thing, that's your decision. I just drafted it in a way that I see the city's role as being more upfront. I think this is, we've had back and forth amongst stakeholders, license holders, council members, and I was given instruction to scale this back to match state law. There are some areas that I recommend you not scale back on. I think you want to know these things up front. I think you need to know who you're going to give this license to. That is your role and that is your right. I don't think I've included anything that I wouldn't ask an applicant if they came, if I were sitting in your shoes, that I wouldn't want to know from them. And I'd like to know it up front. I'd like to have it in a package that's tabbed and says, here's my financials, here's my backers, here's my owners, here's what we're going to do, here's the business plan, here's our pro forma, this is how we're going to run the place, and I have experience over in this community.
Can I ask you a hypothetical?
Sure.
Say I'm a business owner and I just paid my fees to the state and went through the process with them, and I also go through the process with the city and I pay whatever fee we set, and the city denies my ability to have a license.
You're the first stop.
Mm-hmm. But the state can still approve it? Mm-hmm. Is that?
Well, if
we
you
make the recommendation.
The state will not approve it.
So the recommendation, the state approving the license is based upon the local recommendation?
On the on-premises licenses, yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Councilmember Kivel, go ahead.
I understand how everybody is concerned about us overstepping our bounds and not being experts on everything and yada, yada, yada. The important part is just that simple fact. This is a commodity, or could be considered a commodity by somebody that really didn't have the intentions of setting up shop here and capitalizing on this community to be able to show themselves for being a restaurant with liquor or a bar, whatever. So the idea of us having a checklist where we get confirmation for all the pertinent information that we think is viable and necessary to land in the right place, to be a successful have as good a chance of being successful as is possible. Having that up front before we end up even considering approval that they can go to the state and have all these more onerous scrutinizations take place. So some people are thinking that this is just an overreaction, and simply because we're not restaurateurs with that experience, as though we don't understand some of the more simple, straightforward matters that allow a business to end up being successful. That's not very realistic. So I don't have a problem with where this is going. And one thing I would like to know from you, Mr. Wilhelm, is the notion of the brewers being an overlap in this thing has come up a number of times, and I wasn't able to actually find things that pinned it.
Well, I was going to also point out, Mr. Mayor and Council, following so I think there's 3 different drafts so there's 2 different dated drafts, a red line showing the changes between the 2. There's a few pages of material, and then there's a chart from the MLCC that lists, is local legislative body approval required? Is local police approval required? Is local legislative body or police opinion required to be considered? MLCC investigation required? Inspection fees? So that chart gives you the different types of licenses and permits available, and whether the local unit of government, in this case the city of Salt Lyon, gets to say yes or no, or whether it's just they have to take your opinion into consideration, which is the change that I've been referring to, where the state has changed the MLCC rules to take the local control out of the transfers and simply be required to take into account your opinion. So for example, to answer Councilman Kibble's question, new brew pub license is on the first page. Is local legislative body approval required? Yes. So it's included in your ordinance, because you have to make a decision before they can go to the MLCC. And that's all we're trying to do here.
So for the new brewery, okay. Yeah, because the transfer ownership is not, we don't have any say in that. Not for approval.
In this ordinance, you will.
According to the state matrix that you were referencing.
Right. The state is cutting the local out of those transfer decisions. This ordinance puts you in so that, I think the primary purpose of that is to avoid a license, an on-premises license being transferred out of your community within that first 3 years. Now, the 321 version restricts that to location only for the first 3 years after a new license is issued. So my thoughts on this are, your existing license holders, if they've been in business for 3 years, I guess there's a question whether you want to be reviewing their location changes or their transfers of ownership. The MLCC will do that as it's required to. Based on the feedback and the comments that I've been hearing, it seemed that there was some comfort with the MLCC restricting, it's the Class C on-premises licenses, and I think it's the SDM, and matching that 3-year period for all of your on-premises. In other words, if you only have one left, so if you grant that license, they would, under the 122 ordinance, they would have to provide that business plan up front to get approved. They would have to live with that business plan for 3 years. And if they don't want to live with it, they have to come and get your approval to change it and explain why. If they want to transfer within the city or out of the city, they have to come and get your approval. After the 3 years, the 322 goes away, but any transfer under the 122 would remain in place. They have to come and ask you.
Mr. Mayor.
Okay, I got something.
Councilmember Richards, go ahead.
Tim, I got 2 things on this. Going parallel with Mary's registered comments and concerns and the items that you mentioned about all the reviews that have to take place from building department, police department, fire. Okay, I believe there's 11 liquor licenses in this town. I may be wrong. Okay, I think it's 11. Okay, various kinds, not all C licenses. But the way I've read the whole thing, okay, this makes the city council, us right here, the sole board of review for every one of these that comes along, with no intermediate board of review to make a recommendation to us from all these other groups in the Liquor Control Commission. And I don't particularly like that. I think we should have another board other than us being, you know, the sole board of review because of potential biases and influences. Nobody's said anything to me influencing about any of this. I've read every bit of it, okay? I'm not happy with us being the sole board of review for every one of them as they come forward. I think we should have another intermediate board. Number two, let me say something else, okay? It has happened in this town that the license coming in was held by an 80-year-old man with the same name as the son and grandson that were in the business, okay, which they didn't hold the license, okay? And then there might have been a great-grandson down the road who's 12 years old. And all of them, they don't have any, the guy that's actually the liquor license holder never comes to this town. He's a man that lives in retirement someplace else because nobody's ever checked. And his family is running the place their own way. Nobody's ever checked on any of this, but that has happened in this town. And there's no provision in here for review of this or seeing what the, making them come forward and say who owns the business, who owns the building, who owns the franchise, whatever. All this stuff is omitted. It's not in there. Glenn, you got a comment on that?
We do have the ability to ask who owns the building, who owns the business, who owns the license. So, I mean, just because they have the same name, everyone's got birth certificates, social security numbers, identifiers that distinguish one family member from the other. So that's just not accurate. I'm just saying it has happened in this town. Well, that may well be. I can't speak for what happened historically around town, but that doesn't exist right now. Okay, all right. I just wanted, that's all I wanted to say.
Mr. Will?
As to Councilmember Richard's first point, this local government approval is going to require action by the city council. So there's really no way around that. There are other communities, Plymouth is one of them, that uses a review committee. They have a liquor license review committee that does a recommendation. They do the heavy lifting and sit through the application material and make a recommendation to the governing body. That's an option if you'd like to pursue that.
I'd like to pursue that myself.
The reason we haven't is this, historically, this body's done the heavy lifting, and you've got enough difficulty populating boards, we didn't think we needed to add much.
Plymouth sees turnover in liquor licenses pretty routinely, so.
Councilmember Parisian?
Okay, so I'm going to make a couple different comments, but I'm going to jump around. So to answer Councilman Richards, you didn't exactly ask a question, it's more to your comment. The state of Michigan, the law requires that we have on record who owns what business and what liquor license they own. So our police department can make periodic checks whenever. So that's something that we constantly have to have by law. So I don't think maybe in the past that was a practice. I can't speak to that. But nowadays I'm confident that that's not a practice. And then also, speaking to Attorney Wilhelm, your comment earlier about businesses that present us with their plan of operations and they can't change it within 3 years. I struggle with that simply because, go ahead. No, go ahead.
They can do whatever you allow them to do. And you can say yes or you can say no.
Okay.
This is, if I can just characterize, this is a hands-on approach versus a hands-off approach. The hands-off relies heavily on the state to do most of the work, and you're going to get whatever, you're going to play your role in a more, you're hands-off. What I'm recommending is more hands-on, getting more information up front, knowing who's coming into your community, how they're going to finance things, how they're going to operate, knowing what their experience is, and saying yes or no. Same with the transfers, changes in ownership. You want to know those things. Who's in your community? Who's running the place?
No, of course. And I completely see where you're coming
You
from.
can say yes or you can say no. It simply that provides the process that they have to go through.
This was my comment at the last meeting as well, was when you have a plan of operations and you're presenting it to a board or council, a body of some sort that doesn't really have any experience with entrepreneurs or how to run a business, what a plan of operation should look like, I know I can't speak to that. I have never been in the restaurant industry except for waiting tables. That's the extent of my knowledge. So for me, I struggle with being able to tell someone what to do with their business and how to run it. So I'm very laissez-faire. Let's hands off, let the state decide based upon their rigorous application process and investigation process. Because 60% of businesses fail their first year. So in that sense, I wouldn't want a business to keep changing, but at the same time, if they needed to change to survive, I don't want them to have to come to us to make that approval and for us to wait on it, or the process might take a while and they could go out of business in that meantime. Bob, real quick, I have one more question. Hang on. So that's just my statement on that matter. But my question is this going to affect Pumpkin Fest permits and also Blues, Brews, and Brats? Or any other?
I just looked through this chart, and I don't think those permits require local approval. And I don't think that's not the type of on-premises establishment that
Temporary.
The special permits part won't affect that? Okay.
Special events, temporary.
Mr. Donahue, go ahead.
I interface with a lot of liquor license applicants. I've probably had at least a dozen people in my first year and a half here. I do think that for that, at a minimum, the Class C on-premise licenses, we do need criteria. Because I think there have been times where there have been 2 or 3 people at the same time come in, and they're all gung-ho to get a license. They didn't follow through. I can tell after about a 5-minute conversation, people that, in my opinion, would be a quality addition to the community or not. And I often recommend that they go to Oakland County to work on their business plan if they don't have one. But I think the criteria that we have for Class C on-premise licenses is important, because I think we do need to be able to select, because those are a commodity. That's all. That's my opinion.
Chief Collins, did you have something?
A couple of things, Mr. Mayor. On the business plan issue, well, let me go to the shorter one first. On the temporary and special license issue that Councilmember Parisian was questioning, actually, Mr. Cottengim spoke to that briefly. Those permits require the signature of the police chief. If the police chief doesn't sign off on those, they won't be considered by the MLCC. So that's a quick answer to that question. And then as to the business plan, admittedly, this is an extreme and somewhat actual humorous example of what people even thought was going to happen years ago in the city of South Lyon, but it could happen. Suppose the business plan is for a very nice family Italian restaurant, Class C on-premise license, crystal diningware, linen tablecloths, and after 6 months, those folks decide they aren't making it, and if we don't have this ordinance in place, they decide they're going to change their business plan. And now the humorous part is, there was actually a sign that went up on the building that is now, or was formerly Draft Street, that said, "Coming soon, Hooters." The city went berserk. It happened on a weekend, and social media, the phone lines, everything blew up. But yes, that's an extreme example, but it could happen. If council doesn't have the ability to control that, you could say yes to one thing, and 3, 6, 9 months later, wind up with something totally different that perhaps is not palatable at all to the citizens of this community.
Mr. Cottengim.
Does the Planning Commission have anything to do with that?
the planning commission would have something to do with the building. I suppose if they weren't modifying the building, I'm not sure planning commission could stop them if they're an already operating business in a building that had a certificate of occupancy.
Interesting. Thanks for the humorous example.
Councilmember Kibble?
Just one more comment. The notion of somebody submitting a change in plan, it might end up being something as simple as, I mean, most of us here end up frequenting all the establishments that we live around here. So we might have had some opportunity to pick up on things that might not be really hitting the mark. So perhaps we could end up at least giving them some advice. They come in with some a different plan that's substantially different than what their practice has been. I mean, at the very least, we might be able to give them notice that their business isn't failing because of X, Y, Z. It's, you know, there's some givens there. You know, you have bad service, or, you know, everything tastes like potatoes or something. I don't know. But so the notion of having us have some say, I don't think is such an onerous thing. At the very least, you know, because we've got skin in the game too. It's their money, but it's one of our opportunities in the city. So it's a business opportunity that if it flounders, we're going to end up being the ones that end up losing in the long end, the community, I mean, not just the city itself. So the idea of us having some chance to find out if their redirection makes any sense or not and weigh in on that, I think is completely viable. It also gives us a better understanding if they're taking a very organized approach to retooling what their operation is. If it's just some pie-in-the-sky idea, you know, if they're not doing well, then the chances of them recovering from a plan that doesn't make any sense, I think we could at least identify and bring that forward to them. So.
Councilmember Kennedy.
You know, going through this a couple of times, I mean, the initial go through, it looked somewhat heavy-handed, if you will, in dealing with the proprietor, the potential proprietor. But I certainly appreciate the clarification and the reasoning behind why it's written like it is. It does help provide a better background as to what the consequences are down the road if you don't have something that perhaps is a little more structured than some people would like. So I appreciate that.
Councilmember Kurtzwell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not a real regulation kind of person. I think the least amount of interference the government has with respect to the entrepreneurial spirit, I think the better off we are. I don't think anybody is really qualified on this council to sit here and scrutinize somebody's business plan. I don't think there's anybody in the city, quite frankly, on staff that has the sophisticated skill set to technically go through a business's business plan and nitpick it and decide whether or not that business is fit for our community. I do some very little business planning. It does require skill sets that you've got to have a good financial background. When you're looking at a business plan, unless you've got the total picture of the applicant's financing and partnerships and structures of entities that may be joining along with this particular venture, and if you don't understand those kinds of components that do go into a business plan, you really have no business telling a business owner what they can and cannot do. That's just my personal opinion. I think that the free market will determine whether or not that business survives. If they want to come in the city, they want to open up, and they don't do well, they're not going to make it. And I think we have an example of that sitting on the corner tonight, downtown South Lyon. For whatever reason, that particular building or location or whatever, restaurants do not appear to survive well on that corner. And I don't know if it's because there's too much competition in town, but I do believe that Lake Street Tavern and the hotel, for whatever reason, are surviving, and that corner does not. So something is going on in terms of either competition or lack of customers. I don't know what it is, but I am not going to step inside another business owner's business plan when I know there's financing or something behind it. I don't want to be responsible for making those decisions. Let the free market decide whether or not that business is going to make it. That's just how I feel. I think this is over-regulation. I think it's anti-business. I do have a question. I don't know if it's appropriate, Mr. Mayor. I would like to ask Brian a question, or not.
That's fine, but just keep in mind that on Wednesday, this is going to need to be addressed.
I mean, I'll go
I know the young man has a ton of amount of information about the business, and it is affecting him. So if you have a question for Mr. Cottingham, then that is fine. But we need to, on Wednesday, we are going to need to address this.
I mean, I'll go with whatever decision you make, Mr. Mayor, so I don't have to ask.
No,
you.
I believe he had something he wanted to say too earlier, so that's fine.
Okay.
If you'd like to come address the microphone.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for being respectful. I did have a question of the applicant. Do you own the building or do you lease it?
We lease it.
So you could move at any time?
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, we're trying to purchase our building and to add a kitchen and to make some expansion, so it's possible we may be.
Okay.
And the one thing I did want to say, and I don't want to get in the weeds. I'm not here to debate everything. You guys are throwing out a lot of hypothetical situations about what could happen, and I would like to just give you what actually happened to my business within 3 years. We opened in a very small place, which we did a ton of work on our business plan, came before City Council to get approval because we have to, because that's already in the law. We already have to do it. It's already there. We opened in a 38-seat tap room. Did not plan on distributing any time in the very quick future. We were so busy, we were running out of beer, so we had to double the capacity of our tanks in that little place. Once we did that, we hit the 6-month lull, as everyone talks in our industry, because you start to dive down. We had tanks full of product that we could not sell. So a change in our business plan at that moment is what we did, which we were legally able to do. We got with a distributor and started distributing our product, which today we now distribute throughout southern Michigan, all the way to Kalamazoo, New Holland, Grand Rapids. We're in close to 200 bar and restaurants, 100 retail outlets. We had to make that decision on a dime, or we had potential of losing product. So that is a situation where, sure, we could have come before you, went through the packet, and maybe we got an approval in time before I lose product, maybe not. Another situation, in that same place, we did not have outside seating. We were so busy, we couldn't fit people. So in the summer, we decided to add a little outdoor patio, and we did. All this within the first year. I think it was just before 3 years, which year 2, we started the process because we realized that our business was not going to survive in the little location we were. We were so busy that we were losing customers because no one could come in and sit down. So we realized we had to move. This would have been within 3 years. And since you're going to include microbreweries in this, with other Class C retail and on-premise, it has to apply. So we had to find a new location, which we did, to satisfy the demand and to keep our business going. If we wouldn't have made it. There is a thing, of a problem, a good problem to have, but it's still a problem, and it can still go down a wrong road. So there's a series of changes to our business plan that we made within the first 3 years. And some of them, if we wouldn't have made, it really could have drastically changed where we are sitting here today. So that was all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councilmember Parisian, go ahead.
In the event this passes tonight, when does it go into effect? Immediately? Or is there like 30 days, 60 days?
By charter, it's no earlier than 10 days after the adoption. I forget the language exactly, but it's in the charter. It's got to be published before it takes effect.
So,
and no earlier than 10 days.
Can we have the website updated with all the proper forms? Because if we are trying to bolster our downtown and bring businesses there, and any potential businesses that are interested in having a license, I would like that stuff readily available for them. I don't want them to have to search for it. So accurate information, let's update the agendas, and let's update the forms that are necessary for this, depending on whether it passes or not, I guess.
Well, and that's a very good point, Mr. Mayor and Council. You may want to set an effective date that allows staff time to create an application form and understand what the processing is going to be, and we would most likely have to come back and ask the council to approve an application permit fee to offset the staff cost of having to process the application.
More stuff.
I think an expectation of a timeline too on approvals or rejections. I think we should have an expectation, some kind of a schedule of what can be expected for either an up or down vote on somebody submitting something.
Mr. Mayor, there may be variability to that. I think.
Well, I mean, you can always have caveats,
Input on that.
that modify the timeline, but, yeah. I wanted to actually just say one more thing with the whole idea of the witch's hat thing. I can't imagine any of the examples that you had suggested would have been met with any resistance. They all seem perfectly logical, and that's why I can't see somebody giving us any information about the substantive change in their business plan, why that would be so onerous on them. I could see it if you could forecast that there was some real time constraint, where it was sitting on the desk at City Hall, and that prohibited you from being able to act on it. But I think that anything that was really an emergency kind of circumstance that you needed to react, that would be conveyed to everybody so that they knew that this was something that needed to be reviewed pronto. So that was just, I don't think that we're impractical in the way that we operate. So it's a simple matter of having an understanding of what the circumstances are and the need to address things. Well, if there's nothing else, I'd like to, there's no, oh, there we are. Okay. I'm going to go by your recommendation that we use your suggestion of motions. I'd like to make the motion to approve the second reading of an ordinance to add Chapter 8, Alcoholic Liquor, Section 8-1 through 8-69, version date 1/22/18 to the City of South Lyon Code of Ordinances to provide policies, procedures, and regulations for liquor licenses and the operation of licensed premises.
I'll second.
Judy, would you mind going on a roll call on this, please?
Hold on 1 second. Councilmember Kibble?
Yes.
Councilmember Parisian?
No.
Councilmember Kennedy?
Yes.
Councilmember Richards?
No.
Councilmember Walton?
No.
Councilmember Kurtzwell?
No.
Mayor?
Doesn't, no.
No, you need to vote.
Yeah, I'll vote no.
That's required. It's not a,
Right.
yeah. Motion fails.
Yes. Moving on in old business, number 3. Consider setting date for public hearing Superb Fabricating LLC IFT abatement request. The recommendation on this agenda is to set a public hearing date at least 30 days in the future.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Will.
If you recall, this was presented to council a few meetings back. We've since gotten some additional information from Oakland County Equalization, the city's assessor, regarding this specific application and more generally about a draft tax abatement policy. I'm reluctant to suggest adjourning this once again or postponing it once again, but I think that would allow staff additional time to review the additional information, and possibly that may impact, there may be some information in there that we want to convey to the applicant super fabricating. I do understand that there is, we want to try and get to this as quickly as possible. They've submitted a request to establish a district. But nonetheless, we do have additional information that just came in the last few days that we want to have an opportunity to evaluate. So rather than start the clock running, perhaps council would consider postponing this once again.
Do you have a sense of how long?
Yeah.
Mr. Donahue, do you have any thoughts?
The information I received today from Oakland County Equalization, 30 days.
Have you had any communication with the applicant?
Not in the last 3 weeks.
Councilmember Friesen, go ahead.
Attorney Wilhelm, did you just say this was time sensitive though? So is 30 days too much time?
By statute, the establishment of the district is not time sensitive.
Okay.
Once you establish the district, processing the application for the tax abatement is time sensitive. You have to make a decision within 60 days.
Okay.
Councilmember Richards.
Okay, Tim, what you're telling us is the one has to come before the other. You can't reverse them. In other words, the tax abatement ordinance, for a district, has to go before the actual granting of the abatement to that client. Okay.
And I think this information was provided to council. OCE has indicated anecdotally that if a district is created, the State Tax Commission, which is the actual approving state body, requires approval of at least 1 year of abatement. So what that means is we want to get our ducks in a row, give you as much information as we can about the district, because that decision will potentially impact what you do with the application going forward.
I got another question.
Go ahead.
Okay, Tim, at that location on Donovan and Bellotti, okay? No, Ada, Donovan, Ada. Okay, not far from there, you've got Walker's Garage, who's been there for 60, 70 years. It's a commercial business. Then up the hill, you've got the storage units and the rental of the U-Haul rental trailers. Would this district encompass that whole wing of town or just the property of the applicant? Okay? There are businesses there.
No, this is a request for a district only on the applicant's property. And one of the questions raised by your assessor was clarification regarding which property the improvement will be on compared to what the existing facility and property is located.
Okay, all other businesses coming, you got to cross the street there, just Nick Kitticorner from them, where they got the auto parts store, Those are businesses.
This doesn't apply to any other.
Doesn't apply to any of them.
Super.
Okay, all right.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Kurtzwell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When this comes back up, could we please see a cost analysis as to the property taxes that potentially would be abated?
It's my understanding that OCE will be helping us out on that, and I've asked them whether they are willing and able to do that, and they will be providing us with some information about the impact that an abatement would have on the taxes.
That will be available in 30 days?
I don't know. I haven't gotten that far with OCE.
Because I don't want to take a vote on something that I don't have all the information for. If you're trying to set up an industrial tax abatement zone and it's being requested by only one applicant, I'm not voting on that until I understand what the cost impact is of that decision. So if the analysis isn't ready in 30 days, I'm just
These are the
letting you
types
know.
of pieces of information that I'm suggesting a postponement would allow us to get a handle on. The motion or the matter before council is simply to set a public hearing for a future date. But my point is, rather than setting that date and running a clock, let's go get our ducks in a row and set that date at a different time when we have more information available.
I move, Your Honor.
What's that?
I said I move?
Yep.
Okay. I move to postpone agenda item number 3 under old business regarding setting a public hearing on Superb Fabricating LLC's request to establish an industrial development district for no more than 30 days.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Old business number 4, consider tax abatement application fee. The recommendation on this is to approve a tax abatement application fee consistent with Public Act 198 of 1974 and require applicants to deposit funds in an amount set by council, and that costs associated with processing the application will be paid from the deposited funds, and any unused portion will be returned to the applicant.
Mayor, I can try and address this. So this is the application fee component of what we anticipate coming forward from, or has been submitted by Superb Fabricating. Council has addressed this several times in the past. There seemed to be a comfort level with using the format that Lyon Township uses, where you're placing a deposit and working against that. There were some questions about what that fee should be. Lyon Township has a $4,000 fee, and maybe Director Donahue can add some additional information about application fees. I asked him to help out and see if we could get some additional information. I don't have any real way to narrow this down for you.
Go ahead, Bob.
My recommendation would be that we match but do not exceed Lyon Township's fee.
Councilmember Parisian?
I did some research on other communities in the state of Michigan, and the fees range from $350 to $1,000, $2,000-ish. So $4,000 seems a bit excessive. And the communities that I have chosen or pulled for my research are much, much larger than South Lyon. So if they're not charging that excessive fee, I don't think we should be either. That's just my take on that. And this is just from a pool of 5 different communities. That's my answer.
Councilmember Kill?
Wasn't this the thing that you said you only have one crack at funding the pool? Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, by statute, and even the applicant has to file an affidavit with the state tax commission indicating that they've only been charged one fee. I think the methodology used by Lyon Township allows that community to make sure that anything up to $4,000, they're not losing. So if you charge $3.50 or $3.50 as a flat fee, and your publication costs for public hearings and your staff time or an outside consultant to analyze any of the information exceeds that, that's a cost on the community. You can't go back and charge another fee. At least that's the way I read it. So you want to err on the side of being high so that you can recover all of your costs related to this and charge just one fee. So, but there's, it's largely a decision. Some communities, I think, must be taking that risk and saying we will bear some cost. And frankly, I've not asked for and haven't pursued what the staff cost in South Lyon would be to evaluate an application.
Is there a sense of how much we spend in mailings for notice for hearings at Planning Commission, or, the influenced properties that are surrounding a rezoning, that type of thing?
Money letter slot.
Well, I don't think the tax abatement requires, like a zoning amendment, where you have to send out individual notices to people within residents or owners within 300 feet. I don't think that's a requirement under the tax abatement statute. So it's largely a newspaper publication of the public hearing would be a large part of your outside cost. Whether there's additional staff costs that you would try and recover, you certainly don't want to set a fee that makes a profit. You want to offset whatever costs the city would incur in the review process.
Well, when we do a posting in the Herald for whatever our publications are, anybody have a sense of what those costs are? Yeah. Because you can guarantee it's going to end up, there's an awful lot of line space and posting for an abatement, so.
Councilmember Kennedy, go ahead.
Thanks. So Tim, if I understand this, I mean, we basically get one chance to go to the well on this, and they work off of the deposit that's in here. The remainder goes back to the applicant at the end. And so, to Councilman Kibble's point, we get a bill from the paper for this publication. We have an hourly rate that we charge on the part of the admin staff, and all of those are line item deductions against this deposit. And when all is said and done, the remainder goes back to the applicant.
And if I may add, the application part is a 60-day window. Understand the district is not under a clock, but the application is a 60-day window from establishing the district, receiving the application. Once you receive that after the district is created, you have 60 days to decide one way or the other.
Councilmember Parisian?
Tim, is it possible instead of setting an exact fee, can we just say 2% of the property, the total property tax is abated?
I think that is are you pulling up from the statute?
It's on the agenda note, but it is from the statute.
I think that's the limitation on what the fee can be.
Can we just, instead of giving an exact fee, just use that number as a buffer? And it'll be different every time, but you know you'll be within state law. I don't actually know if you can do that, I'm just asking.
I mean, I think you can.
I haven't seen any communities do
Sitting here today,
that.
I would want to look at that.
Okay, because I haven't, I mean, to be completely full disclosure, to be honest, I haven't seen any communities do that. It's just a thought.
The question is how you structure it, how the language, and how you
Right.
determine that based on each application. And again, I think there's the caution with respect to setting any fee is the goal of a fee is not to generate more than you have costs.
Just
It's
to cover
simply
your
offset
costs,
the city's costs. The reason the recommendation is to follow the Lyon Township is that it seems to be an effective way to not have to guess at setting a flat fee and being low, but rather work against a deposit to recover all of your own costs.
My fear is Lyon Township is in different circumstances than we are. So I don't necessarily know if we should be following them necessarily.
My concern is if this were a viable alternative, everybody would do that because they're protected completely from any exposure.
The 2%?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I am thinking that's not available, that's not a vehicle available to
I haven't
us.
seen it.
Well, I think the question is, that it's certainly couched, if I recall correctly from the statute, it's couched as a maximum of your application fee.
Right. But I'm just thinking that if you incur costs above what you had charged, it would have to, that 2% would be the cap irrespective of wherever the costs went.
If I see, and again, I'm not finding this language right in front of me.
The application fee shall not exceed the actual cost incurred by the city in processing the application, or 2% of the total property taxes abated under the act.
Right, so how do you calculate taxes that are abated before you?
Are you looking for it? It's 207.555, section 5, subsection 3.
I mean, my recommendation would simply be to fill in the blank with an appropriate, what the council believes is an appropriate number in the recommended motion. If you think 4,000 is high, I would suggest you figure out what number the council is comfortable with. That's my recommendation.
Councilmember Richards, go ahead.
I would feel comfortable, Tim, with proposing a reasonable figure that would be agreeable for someone to come in and set up an antique store. It would be much less in postings and mailings and everything than someone that wants to come in and build a new factory on the west side or something on Dixboro. You know, it just stands to reason. You know, if it's a smaller business, they're going to have less cost. A big deal comes in, if it does, or it did, you know, the cost would be higher.
If I may, Mr. Mayor?
Yep, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Why don't I find out if, or collectively staff, we can figure out if OCE is an external cost related to the processing of entities. I think that may help, in my mind, take out one of the variables that I have no information.
Could I just add one extra thing? If we had a big package of somebody asking for a big abatement and there was likely an awful lot of research and analytical aspects to it, that we might end up incurring some real costs. We don't want to end up setting this so low that we're exposing ourselves to having to eat all that research on our own. So, because I mean, my understanding with the tube mill is it's likely to end up being something substantively bigger than the superb fabricating thing. And who knows what might end up happening on Dixboro if anybody changes their mind about that being light industrial. So, I mean, I don't think we need to go for the gold, but we need to be realistic about this. Can't be like the $600 thing.
Okay, I'll make a motion. Do I have to read the whole thing on the bottom?
Yeah, give it a try, bud.
Motion to approve the tax abatement application fee consistent with Public Act 198 of 1974. Require the applicants to deposit X amount with the city and a cost associated with processing. The applicant will be paid from the deposited funds, and any unused portion will be returned to the applicant, and that this application fee be included on the city's fee schedule. My motion is to postpone this decision.
Till when?
So, I don't know, 60 days. That's what you suggested. 30 days? I thought you said, okay, all right, 30 days. Second? Anybody else?
Yeah, I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? Thanks, Steve. Motion passes. We did have an old business addition to the agenda this evening. So number 5. This is in regards to amending the official zoning map of the city of South Lyon and the property at 500 Stryker.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. At the last meeting where this item came up for your consideration, I guess there were some additional questions about the rezoning and the property. Something to keep in mind, too, is before the applicant came through with the previous request, the Planning Commission spent maybe a year meeting on several occasions with the applicant before they purchased the property, looking at what some possible options would be. It's a challenging site, and they recognized it was challenging both in terms of the mixture of uses around it and also the physical constraints on the site. And that's why you had seen the previous conditional rezoning request to do a storage facility. Well, lo and behold, somebody in the area in the township built a storage facility, so they didn't feel comfortable moving forward with that. So since that time, they've looked at other options. They recognize that they can't reasonably use a property by putting, in this particular case, housing on the back portion of the property because of the Yerkes Drain and the cost of crossing that, providing the second means of access and so forth. So at this point, they're just looking to develop the front portion of the property. And I guess the questions related to both traffic and density, which are really interrelated with one another. The thing to keep in mind is with this particular zoning district and any zoning district, what you see as the allowable number of units is the maximum they can get. That's before you take a look at all of the site plan requirements that must also be met. So in this particular case, I know the applicant has given us some layouts, things that they're considering. We're not locked into it because it's not a conditional rezone, it's a straight rezoning. But I think in looking at what they've proposed and running my own estimates, they're probably going to be somewhere between 35 and 45 units, looking at townhouses. In order to provide the circulation around the site, to make the folks in the fire department happy, and to be able to provide the circulation that the engineers also are going to be looking for, probably will end up, in that range. So I estimated 40, which was right in between. And if you look at the traffic that would be generated, units like this are typically being purchased or leased by empty nesters, which would be both millennials, younger folks, and folks looking to downsize from their houses. And so I split it between the two in terms of the trips that would be generated, and came up with approximately, if it were single family, about 150 vehicle trips per day. If it were developed as townhouses, as they're proposing, you'd have approximately 231 vehicle trips a day. You're talking about one trip every 20 minutes. It's a nominal amount. It's not a huge number. Really is not a significant traffic impact between the two uses. There's not enough units. You couldn't put enough units on that site to be able to generate a real traffic problem there. So with that being said, the Planning Commission did look at this very closely for a long time at this property. What they're proposing is a good transitional use. You do have the manufactured housing community next door. You have cemetery on the other side. You've got multiple family uses throughout the area. So it really is a good transitional use for there. They would still have to meet all of the zoning requirements for this site, which would pretty much preclude them from getting even close to the maximum density that that district would allow. It matches our master plan future land use designation for that particular site, and we think in the end it allows them a reasonable use of the property, which on that particular site it's going to be very difficult to find uses that will work at that location. So a lot of thought and effort has gone into this. I know the Planning Commission is going to take a real hard look at the site plan that would be submitted for them, and would go through all of the consultants and reviewers before it even got to them. So I think we feel pretty comfortable with the rezoning request. And if you have other questions related to this or any others that you may have, I'll be happy to discuss it with you.
As always. Carmine, how are you?
Good, Mary, how are you?
I have two quick questions for you. Is there a site plan that was submitted to the Planning Commission, or no, not yet?
No, not yet. That would be the next step. If they receive the rezoning, they would come back with a site plan. It would go through the review process. Right. Usually it goes through a couple of iterations before we feel comfortable
I thought I heard you say something before earlier, so I must have misheard. Conceptuals, maybe that was it. And just out of curiosity, do we know what the price point would be for the townhouses?
We'll let the applicants do. I would say that one of the things we did before we even brought this rezoning to the Planning Commission was we did ask them to look at circulation. And so before you put a lot of effort into rezoning this property, going through site plan and all, you really want to take a look at how you're going to provide access to it. So that's why they came up with their own concept plan. We circulated it amongst the people that would review it, and we gave them feedback on that. So we want them to be aware. We're trying to be fair with them. We don't want them to walk into the Planning Commission and be shocked that, oh, wow, we can't do this because we don't have good circulation and access
That's fair.
to the site.
Yeah. Thank you.
I got a question.
Oh, hang on, Carl.
Okay.
Councilmember Kennedy?
So, the access to the site, it's going to be, it's basically a horseshoe because both entrances are on the same street, right?
Yeah. Or a boulevard, whatever is called for by the
Okay, so it
traffic
isn't,
itself.
one's at one end, one's at the other. I mean, it just comes in, makes a loop, and comes back out on the same street.
Yeah, correct.
Councilmember Richards?
Okay, Mr. Carmine, nice to see you.
Good to see you too,
Okay, in the event that the 40 units is not deemed attainable, okay, and they want to stop at 30 or 25 or something like that. The other considerations that are allowed under the zoning contract, under the other allowable categories, would they just submit a different site plan, or would they have to come back to council to change something 3/4 through the building process? Okay, in other words, the first 10 units the first year, 10 units the next year, so on and so forth. And then they say, well, gee whiz, maybe we want to just change and put an old folks home or a aftercare unit or something on the last part. That's site plan, not zoning. Am I correct?
It depends. If they're proposing something that fits into the current zoning district that they're approved for, then it would just go to planning commission. But if they're proposing something that goes out of that, then it would come back to
okay,
city
all right.
council.
I want to make noted, this is your opinion on this, okay? A bridge across that Yerkes drain, the jurisdiction would be solely the Drain Commission, Oakland County. They would be the sole builders and constructors of that, because I've talked to them before. What you'd have to do is put a deposit up front. I have no idea how much it'd be, but they're the only ones that would build a bridge across Yerkes Drain, but then you got to maintain it, okay? That's the catch. If that came about in the future, would that have to come before council? Or would that strictly be site plan?
I'm not sure. The engineers would have to answer that one, because I'm really not sure, to be honest with you.
We approve the zoning, there's R2, and there's some little variations that can be done. The applicant isn't locked in to a schedule that's going to strangle him, okay, to complete this. He can get it done, so on and so forth. But then he might look at the option with the bridge, okay? And as last I knew, it takes $50,000, maybe more, today, up front, to get the Oakland County Drain Commission to do it their way. And that's the only way they'll allow it. They're very strict, you know? But does that fall under site plan?
It would fall under site plan, yes. Whether there would be an aspect of it that would have to come for council approval, I don't know. I haven't really dealt with that before.
Okay.
The engineers would answer that question, but definitely site plan approval. They would have to go back to the planning commission and amend their site plan.
Okay, that's all. I'm cool on the rest of it.
Councilmember Kittle.
First off, I'm thinking that your triptych is kind of conservative with the, there's an awful lot of assumptions that you're making. The idea that half of it would be the empty nesters and all the rest of it. But when you suggest that it'd be one trip every 20 minutes, I mean, that's just not how traffic works. My concern, and I'm thinking that the rest of the people that had traffic concerns were primarily focused on the idea of trips at rush hours, where you're stacking up traffic, and how long does it take to clear? How often are people going to be trapped in their driveways because there's a line of cars leaving or coming from that place? I guess the only thing that's really up in the air, and you won't be able to give any hard numbers, but tax revenue generated from either the R3 zoning or this multiple zoning, what's a projection on which one, I mean, are they commensurate? Is there one more enhanced than the other? Those are kind of critical decision-making circumstances, and in my view, I mean, I don't have any misgivings with the idea of this being put to constructive use. I just want it to end up being a real benefit to the community, and if we're going to incur more traffic, I'd like it to be because there's a lot more revenue generated that'll help the general community be able to offset costs for taking care of issues. So,
my guess is if you were, and so far nobody's found it to be feasible to build single-family homes there, they would likely be at the lowest end of the price point, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But I think if you built attached townhouses in there, they would probably be at least in the same price range. So you'd have a little over double the amount of tax generated from this rezoning than you would if it were to remain single family, if you could get somebody to build. It's hard these days with the cost of infrastructure. It's hard to get folks to do single family. There's an article in the Free Press on Sunday yesterday about that it's getting very difficult to build entry-level housing because of the cost, the profit margins, the cost of putting the infrastructure in. And so, here you've got a case where you have units that would probably be more saleable, and you'd have double the number over the single family, and you'd likely be able to sell them. It's a tough housing market right now. It's hard to find anything.
now I'm not much of a proponent for the idea of squeezing more homes into a smaller footprint. But when you see around what's going on around us and what had been proposed for whatever the development was going to be off of 11 Mile there, where we're cutting the side yard setbacks down to 5 foot now instead
Thomasville.
of, yeah, Thomasville, right. And I've seen in some very normal to large size homes in Novi and Wixom where that's literally what their side yards are. This seems like the kind of, because you're not going to end up still generating the competitive density of units for homes, R3 homes in that area that you would the townhouse thing, because they're interconnected, correct? I mean, they're like clusters of homes? Yeah.
Yes.
But I mean, has that been entertained at all? The idea of us modifying isn't 8,000 square foot R3? Isn't that the limit for an R3?
Yeah.
Or is it 6,250?
No, I think it was as I recall, it was like 8,400 or something, like 8,700 in that range in the R3. Yeah, you could still attempt to get smaller lots and get increased density over single-family homes. It's just the folks who are looking to buy, those homes, if you could get the density that you need, and that's questionable, whether you could get the density to make it viable, to make it feasible. Even if you could, you're aiming at a different demographic, and they're going to be a little more hesitant to buy at that location than folks who are empty nesters on either end. And just so you know too, the Lexington Oaks project, if you didn't know, and I had access to information that most people don't, every single one of those units were purchased by folks who were recently retired, who were downsizing from bigger homes, every one of them. Mm-hmm. Okay, no families, it was all. Mm-hmm. So that's, in that right now, there's a huge shortage. So a project like what they're proposing will likely do very well. It's just people can't downsize right now, along with the shortage of starter homes, which I don't know how we get over that problem. But this, from a tax perspective, is probably the best alternative you're going to get at that particular location without negatively impacting, the surrounding area. I mean, I know you mentioned the peak hour and so forth. Yeah, you might get additional trips, but it's not going to be enough to exceed the threshold that it's going to be highly noticeable. That's going to create, huge traffic congestion.
Let me say something.
Councilmember Richards?
Oh, Carmine, if you get empty nesters, brings to my mind, it brings retirees, okay, that are living alone, and they're not going to be driving back and forth every day, you know, so that if they're happy enough to live there, between a cemetery and a trailer park that has its problems, okay, then, you know, they'll probably won't be using their cars and gallivanting around as much, you know. If you have, you know, age group, you know, that's my thought, you know.
Yeah. Well, and you're right. The what I used for this information was the Institute of Transportation Engineers. They do studies all the time, and they have trip calculations based on the type of uses. And so I looked at empty nesters, like we're talking about, who, you know, early retirees who drive, you know, 4 trips a day, versus folks who are in apartments and townhouses, you know, who are probably millennials, more active people. They're around 7 trips a day. And then when you get to single-family residential, you're up near 10 trips a day. You know, because eventually, you know, you have kids and they have another car, and there's a lot more activity. So they do these studies, and that's the information that not just planners but transportation consultants and the like use. That's kind of like the Bible for trip generation. So that's where these numbers came from. And when we look at a site like, and when you've reviewed enough of these, after a while you just kind of know whether it's going to exceed the threshold or not, whether it's going to produce a big number. And I know when we saw this, we didn't think it would have a very big impact when the numbers came in, and sure enough.
There's also a narrative about all the foot traffic that it'll generate for the active downtown. Well, I mean, those are kind of conflicting arguments. That, you know, you don't leave because you're elderly, but you're going to walk downtown. So.
Actually, most early retirees these days are actually doing a lot more. They're still driving. You know, you're talking about folks who are retiring from anywhere from their 50s, you know, then getting into 60s. Early retirees are a big market right now, and they're still driving around, you know, going everywhere. It's not, you know, that's not unusual. But what the master plan called for, and the reason this site was designated to allow this type of housing, is so that we will be putting a lot more people around the downtown area, and that's how you get businesses to locate in the downtown, by having a lot of rooftops and a lot of people to go and shop and, you know, visit the restaurants and the like. And the whole master plan was built on that basis. So that's why this is designated like that.
I'll make the motion, if you want, Mr. Mayor.
See it down there? It's kind of small.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll make the motion. Motion to approve the first reading of the ordinance to amend the official zoning map of the city of South Lyon, rezoning parcel 21-29-176-0112, 500 Stryker Street, from R3 to RM2.
It's 012. You said 0112, so.
Okay.
Just a quick one to
I
correct.
stand corrected. Okay.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Aye. I mean, no.
Okay.
Do it again.
Nope. So you were on the supports. So we're going to do the.
Yeah.
So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
No.
Roll call.
You want a roll call?
No, I just wanted to make sure you had it.
I got it.
Okay.
New business.
That's me.
Number 1, consider tree trimming by DTE on Liberty Lake, Whipple, Washington, and Warren Streets. This item was put on the agenda by Councilman Richards.
Yeah, may I go up front? I wish to go up front.
If you would like to, that's fine.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Microphone.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wish to make an apology to the council. I admit that I was wrong. When I approached this subject, the last council meeting, I was jumping to conclusions beforehand and not looking at the big picture, and I went about it wrong. And I'm sorry that I did so, and I asked that it be replaced onto the next upcoming agenda, because it won't take long. It's pretty simple. Okay. You have the two maps included with this that were presented to us over a year ago by DTE. They're hard to read, I grant you, but if you look at them closely, the areas where they're planned to do their tree trimming is in the middle of the blocks, not on the actual streets. Okay? And Councilman Kibble, you would be very well aware, because I'm sure they did between your lot and your neighbors just the last
Where
time
the
around.
wires are, yes, that's where they trim.
And that's the way all those, because they have to park the trucks out front and walk in with the climbing gear, if necessary, get up in there and do the necessary trimming and drag the limbs out to the street to chip them up. Well, they haven't been here this week, but the previous week, they were here every day, and one day there was 10 trucks. All of it in this quadrant, okay? With Asplund Tree Trimming, their main contractor for DTE, that's about a $5,000 to $9,000 payroll for labor for a day, okay? Because I was in that business for years. Anyway, it's my idea to turn the tables a little bit. We've got all this capability, okay? And they're the best in the business, the best equipped, best trucks, skillful workers, okay? Make them an offer through Mike here or the city manager. Approach them with a price. I would recommend $7,000 to $9,000 for 3 days worth of work with just 4 trucks, okay, over both of these sections of our town. And this is the trees that are on the street. There wouldn't be any chipping because there isn't any branches. When they take the tops out and the stems and the dead legs that are up there, just bring them down and leave them in 5-foot or 50-inch lengths, and they'll disappear. Because the firewood cutters and the grilling commandos will have them removed very shortly. There won't be any debris. And as it stands right now, we've got 5,000 to 10,000 pounds. My estimate. That's what I used to do for a living, was estimate weights and measures. Standing in our streets on Liberty, Big Time, Warren, Washington, over to Whipple, and at the corner of Hagedorn, and not going on the Two Mill property at all. All I'm saying is we've got an opportunity here to save, in my opinion, $20,000 to $30,000 down the road. And I'm about saving money. But instead of somebody submitting a bill, here's our bill, or we want you to get 3 bids, we put out our own bid. Okay? That's sort of the way my philosophy works. If they want to do it, fine, we have the money to pay them. And we make the big victory, we save the money down the road. But if they don't want to do it, it has to go through DTE. Because I've talked to all the crews, Ashland can't do it on their own. It has to come from the city directly to DTE for them to designate redoing and cutting the dead wood out of the side streets here. They're perfectly capable of doing it fast and clean. If we pieced it out with Normar, it'd cost us 3 times as much. And it's the perfect time of year to do it, when the birds haven't started their nesting yet, and a lot of the dead stuff, and there isn't any bugs in the stuff that's that dead. Anyway, it's my idea that this would save us a lot of money. A long nickel down the road, okay? And part of my mantle of focus and philosophy is to propose ways that the city can save money, okay? And this is one thing that I thought would be good, and that's why I asked to bring it to council in a proper way. And I hope I have done that. And if anybody has any questions, here we are. Let's throw a question at me, please.
Councilmember Kivel?
I think the idea of us trimming trees is a genuine good idea. We've got a number of bad sections that there's some dangerous trees out there. I think that the obligation that we have is I have to identify them, index what trees would need some action, and then put it out to bid. That's just like we do everything. Get 3 bids so that the lowest bidder is the one that ends up getting the award, and we move forward.
I agree with you. That's the way a lot of it's normally done. But since we have the advantage of Asplund being in town, and this plan was already approved by us 2 years ago, I believe, if we could make the modification with DTE, okay, since they took a year before they came to town to do this, we're glad they're doing it, but they got the best crews, and the best equipment, and it's all available right here. Why not take advantage of our opportunity and throw a price at the regional representative through Mike, at the DTE representatives that we've dealt with in the past, and see if they do it.
Because we have an obligation to get 3 bids. That's how we do business.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to get, that would take a lot of time. This is just my proposal. I acknowledge your ideas, okay? Entertain another question from somebody else.
Councilmember Parisian?
It's not necessarily a question. It's I just want to make sure that I cross my T's and dot my I's and not become someone's next news story. But I live on Liberty Street, so I don't see this as a conflict. But God forbid if there was a benefit to me, I don't want to have to deal with a conflict issue. So I'm just disclosing that I live on Liberty, you live on Lake, so we do have possible interest in this. Not that it matters. I really don't think that there is a conflict of interest here. But again, I don't want to be someone's news story. Thank you.
I don't blame you, but I don't think there's a conflict.
The trimming would be anyway.
Steve, give me what's your ideas on this? You, Steve, yeah. Mr. Kennedy.
Okay, yeah, well, here's my take on it. I agree with Councilmember Kivel. We do need 3 bids. If Asplund wants to bid the job, they would, probably be welcome to do so. The question I would have is that I'm sure that, it's a well-run function when they send tree trimming crews out from the electric utility. Okay, they have it all laid out. They told you a year in advance when they're coming to those quadrants. So they have a schedule well established. Now, unless they're going to bring in additional crews, I really, I don't know that DT is going to interrupt their cutting schedule to accommodate us, but that would be totally their decision to prolong the time in this city instead of moving that crew on down the road to the next city they're obligated to go to. Again, if they want to bid for the business, they would be welcome to put in a bid just like Normar does. And again, I don't know what's involved with from the bidding standpoint. Normar is already an approved vendor. I don't know that Asplund's an approved vendor. I don't know what it takes to get on the approved vendor list and so forth. But the 3 bids are to follow the procedure that's dictated in the city charter when you do something like this. There's a logical reason why you can't. And in this case, they're all delivering the same service. The only advantage they have, and this, I understand what you're trying to capitalize on, is the fact they are currently here and sitting on those streets.
Yeah, well, Normar is usually called in by our DPW when we have trees that fall across the bike path many times, okay? And they usually do a lot of our work when we've had a disaster. My approach and my thought on the matter was to go through DTE because the Asplund guys told me we can't deal with the city directly. Our orders have got to come from DTE for us to be directed to cut the dead wood on the main streets, right across from City Hall here. We've seen it every day. Okay. Anyway, that's how it works.
And with regard to that, because I've spent some time with, T&D crews at other electric utilities, that subcontractor is being directed by DTE.
Yeah.
Now, Asplin in and of themselves could contract and bid on that job, okay? Not necessarily the same crew that's here, but they have other resources they could provide, okay? And obviously, we're not going to direct that crew to do anything because they are under contract with DTE. But again, Asplin could contract separately if they want to bid on that job, just like any other tree removal service could. And also the fact, and again, I understand what you're saying here, Carl. The DPW crew does trim the trees. They have equipment that'll reach up so far. Some of the larger trees, no, they're not going to get up there. They don't have a bucket truck or anything like that.
We don't
to
have
allow
a
them to do
forestry
that.
division.
Right. So, and that's why they've, in the past, brought Normar in to do that type of work.
In the future, someday, that might change. We might have a forestry division. But we don't today, right now. Anyway, Councilman Kurtzwell and Councilman Walton, do you have any thoughts on the matter to go along with everybody? Okay. All right. Well, that's my motion, or my recommendation, and I don't know if you wanted me to withdraw it. I suppose I could, but I thought it would be a good thing and a big money saver for our city just to contact them, okay? And see what they say. And if the charter requires other bids to come in, I'm sure Mike can do it through the city manager. I'm sure there's other tree companies out there. I worked for them. I know there are, so just,
Well, thank you very much, Carl.
Okay.
If we don't have a second, I think we're going to let this die tonight.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep, thank you.
I do think that it's worthy, though, to try to create a list of known things that need attention, just so we can try to formulate a list to try to put out for bid at some point.
New business number 2, consider date for public hearing for the budget. The recommendation, set public hearing date for Tuesday, May 29th at 7:30 p.m.
I'll make the motion to set public hearing date for May 29th, 2018 for the 2018-2019 budget at 7:30 p.m.
Really quickly, I just got a quick question about that. I just realized it thanks to Mr. Kennedy having his calendar here. Is that the normal city council meeting because of the Memorial Day holiday?
Yeah, it's on Tuesday.
So is that going to be a problem, or is it just all
We already
one?
scheduled it for Tuesday.
It's on a Tuesday.
Yeah, Monday is Memorial Day.
Right.
So this is the regular meeting. We're gonna
Okay,
do
so we
this
can
at.
just do this at the regular meeting?
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, so did we have a motion? Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Yes, Tim?
Section 8.4 of the charter requires, or states, at a meeting held not later than the second regular meeting in May, council shall by resolution adopt a budget for the next fiscal year and appropriation of the
This will be the second meeting.
It's the second meeting.
So I believe we
Yeah.
would, yeah.
Didn't we break that rule
Okay.
last year?
Thank you, Tim.
Yep.
All right, so we had a motion, we had a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion passes.
Who was our second?
Steve?
Thank you, Judy. We'll move on to the budget. Keep in mind, we are meeting about the budget next week.
Can we take a break?
Councilmember Kurtzwell, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to make this quick. I just want to make sure council knows that I've drafted a proposed resolution regarding the minimum balance in the general fund. We've had a discussion about this policy before. I just assume that Lori and Brian are taking a look at it. Hopefully it'll be provided at the next budget meeting for council's discussion. Next, I wanted to ask the interim city manager, Do you recall when you got the report from Kramer regarding the utility rates?
Not precisely, within the last month, probably.
The only thing that I would request is that any information that you get that's related to the budget, could it come with the budget? Because that would have been helpful to have at the meeting when Brian was talking about it. Did you have it by then?
I think I
He had
probably
it.
did, but I'm not sure because I'd have to check and see when the email came. And as I'll address in my manager's report, Mr. Kramer will actually be coming here to discuss his findings.
Yeah, but it would have been nice for council to have that information at the budget meeting on March 28th. That's the point I'm making.
I'm not sure what the timing was, but I can certainly
Okay.
forward what I do have to council.
Yeah, I'd just like to see it by the next meeting, that's all. Like to see that. And I want to know if someone can contact MERS and see if the city can pay the unfunded pension liability and OPEB liability for selected employee groups. So for example, if there is money in the sewer and water department funds and that is considered a legitimate charge against those funds, then I wonder if it's possible if we can pay down some of their unfunded pension liabilities. And then so at least sewer and water would be covered in terms of unfunded pension liability. And what that does is it gives us an opportunity to make a payment down on the unfunded pension portion. It's coming out of a fund that has excess revenue, which is a good thing, and you wouldn't have to raise taxes. So I'm just brainstorming and looking for alternatives to see if that's possible. So the unfunded, so if we made a $50,000 payment down or a $100,000 payment down, that money would be targeted only for sewer and water employees as a pay down for their unfunded pension portion. So that's what I'm asking about.
Okay.
If that can be done. I don't know if it can
Off
be
the
done.
top of my head, I believe that the divisions are based on bargaining unit. And the issue that I would see with that would be that the bargaining unit that includes water and sewer also includes DPW. Water and sewer, as you say, is funded by an enterprise fund. DPW is funded by general fund and state and federal funding. So there's a good chance because of that commingling that might not work.
Why? Why is that even relevant?
Well, I guess I don't understand why it wouldn't be relevant.
I don't even see why that would be relevant. If I want to pay down, we could talk about that. I don't want to take up time tonight, but could we just look in it? Just look into it and just see
What I'm saying is if you pay down, it would be by division, and there's commingling of the different departments within that division.
Rather than creating an obstacle, let's ask the question and explore the opportunity. Let's just explore and see if there's an opportunity there for us to make a down payment, because we know we have a fund that we can pull money from. That's all I want to know.
I wasn't creating an obstacle. I'll be happy to ask the question.
Okay.
But you did ask if that was likely to work. I gave you an answer.
Okay, well, anyway, the next question is, where are we on the DPW putting together a plan in terms of the things that need to be done? Have you met with Dennis or?
He has been out there to inspect everything, and we are currently fixing a few things, and he's put a list together, and we're in that process currently.
Can we have that at the budget meeting?
Sure.
And the reason for that is it's tough for me to appropriate funds for DPW. I don't have a problem doing it, but I want to make sure that it's a priority. So if the roof is really bad, then maybe the change of putting the money towards cement should go towards something else. And I can't make a decision until I have everything in front of me. So,
Sure, we can have that list for you. Not a problem.
just for information. And then have there been any amendments to the budget at all?
There have been none since January.
There's going to be one next time, just to let you know, for the sewer repair.
Okay, all right. Because that's another thing.
I just got those bills in, so.
Because when you're working on a budget, we're getting close to the end of working on the budget. If you don't have your numbers aligned, it's a little tough to make decisions, because you're looking at this year's fiscal budget and trying to move forward. So that's my issue on that. Okay, that's it for the budget then. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Move on to the manager's report with Chief Collins.
Sure. And I didn't have time to prepare for this, but Councilmember Kurzweil's statement that I would be receiving $200,000 in a year was mind-boggling. So just on a quick analysis of the payroll report, I am suspecting that Councilmember Kurzweil's calculations are based on the assumption that there were 2 pay periods covered by that report. It would appear that there are actually 3 pay periods covered by that report, which would change the numbers significantly.
Thank you, Chief.
Do you have an amount of what you think it's going to be?
No, I didn't do that calculation, just that the $200,000 figure is totally out of line.
Well, wait a minute, I guess I don't understand then. I'm looking at a March 2018 payroll report. Does this cover 3 months?
It covers 3 pay periods.
3 pay
Instead
periods?
of 2. I believe you based your calculations on your assumption that it covered 2 pay periods. It appears to cover 3 pay periods.
No, I thought this covered 4 pay periods a month. So actually,
No, now we're confusing a pay period with a week. A pay period is 80 hours.
so when I look at this March 2018 payroll report, am I not looking at, I'm looking at a number of $13,902. Is that not for all the pay periods in the month of March?
It is, but you got to remember, there's 2 extra pay periods through a year,
Right.
and one of those hit in that month. So you're basing your whole calculations on 3 pay periods every month.
But there's 4. I actually included an extra one.
No, there are never 4 pay periods in a month.
There's 3. There's 2
There are
3
normally,
periods.
there are normally 2 pay periods in a month.
Okay. Okay. Well, then you know what I'll do? I'll just FOIA it. I'll just FOIA the information.
It's not necessary to FOIA it. A simple phone call would have taken 2 minutes for Lori to explain that.
Okay, well, I can call Lori
It's
tomorrow.
absolutely not necessary to
Okay.
FOIA it.
Okay, well, I'll call Lori tomorrow.
And I think you'll find the number far lower, probably right around 125 or less, not 200,000.
Okay, so 145 plus.
125 or less.
125 plus the 40 on your vacation, that's still $165,000 this year. Okay,
That would assume that, one, we're going to cash in that vacation time.
well, we'll talk about that at the budget meeting. That's the whole point, is to get those contingent liabilities paid off. So,
Okay, let's return back to the manager's report, please.
Okay, contract expiration and negotiations with the International Union of Operating Engineers is coming up. That's the clerical union. And I am asking for any council input as to goals for the new contract, language changes, language corrections, or contract goals. Obviously, we're aware of a number of those already, but if council has any additional input, I would welcome that. I'm also seeing if there's any interest on the part of council to assign a council representative to our bargaining committee that right now would consist of myself and labor attorney Patrick Azeltine.
Chief, I have a quick question. Sorry, actually,
ahead.
Mr. Mann. May I
Councilman-
ask one question?
No, Parisian, go ahead.
Chief, can we scale back for just a second? Your previous comment that you made about additional language, if we want to change something or add something, when would you need that by, and can we see the documentation, or is it available online?
I'll be happy to provide copies of the contract to any or all who would like it.
Could
I
you
can
shoot a
have it
copy to
emailed
all
out.
of us, please?
I can certainly
And then
do
That way
that.
we can tell whether or not we need to make additions. Thank you, Chief. When do you need that by?
I would say within a couple of weeks would do it. We're just starting, we're just to the point where we're looking for dates to schedule the preliminary bargaining meetings.
Thanks.
And is there a sense of council as to appointment of a council representative to the bargaining committee?
I don't have any qualms with doing it if the council thinks that we need somebody involved.
I'm simply making the offer. It's not necessary, and I'm not requesting it, but the offer is there.
I think it's a little different than the PD contract, you know, so.
I'll move on to my item number 2, which is with respect to Warren Kramer of Robert Baird and Company. He has completed a review of the city's water and sewer revenues. He will attend the May 14th City Council meeting to discuss his recommendation for rates as well as the city's enterprise fund balance policy. So, Mr. Kramer, May 14th. And I already have a note that I will get his report out to all of council.
Thanks, Chief.
And my last item was, during last week, I conducted a meeting regarding the review fee escrow ordinance and related unbilled, uncollected review fees from developers and builders. City staff members who will be involved in the billing collection process were in attendance. Also participating in the meeting was Ms. Kelly McIntyre from CIB Planning. That's the city's planning consultant. A process was developed for identifying chargeable consultant fees to include engineering, planning, legal, and any other miscellaneous ones that would apply, and correlating them with appropriate projects. Invoicing and tracking components for the review fee process were also implemented. Zoning Administrator Brzezowski will review consultant invoices and coordinate charges and billing. Administrative Assistant Brandon will handle billing and tracking of review fee escrow deposits. It was anticipated that initial invoices and escrow deposit adjustment notices would be sent out by April 12th. In fact, $13,000 worth of invoices were sent out today.
That's great.
And that's it for the manager's report.
Does anyone have any questions for Chief Collins?
Mayor, I do.
Yeah, Councilmember Walton, please go ahead.
Thank you. Chief, I just have a quick question. Is it true that there's possibility that the city is considering dumping in the park? I think I was understanding leaves and...
I wouldn't use the term dumping. I would use the term composting.
Composting.
But it's my understanding, and this precedes my tenure as interim city manager. It was my understanding that when the contract with Mr. Hamblin was terminated, which my impression, I don't have the figures in front of me, was 2015 at the end of that year. And then he farmed, I believe, for one more year, and then received written notice in, I think, November of 17 that the city was taking charge of that property back. It's my understanding that the city manager and council, as those steps were implemented, at that time had the intention of saving a lot of city dollars for the cost to the city of transporting and, in fact, dumping leaves somewhere else would end, and the city and DPW would resume composting at Volunteer Park. That's my understanding. Maybe Mr. Bovin has some.
It's exactly my understanding as well.
Okay. I'm a little concerned with that. I know that our state parks are currently changing some of their laws and not allowing people to bring outside wood in to burn because they don't want to spread any bugs, they don't want to spread any invasive weeds. And if we're moving things over to Volunteer Park to compost it, are we putting ourselves at that same risk?
My impression would be that anything we would be putting in Volunteer Park would be very localized. It would be the very leaves that are here already within the city limits.
Right, but we're taking care of them and moving them off-site, or what are we doing with them now?
right now, we're paying, and maybe Mr. Bovin knows the money, we're paying.
don't know the exact amount,
a
but it's
lot
a
of money
lot of money.
to transport them somewhere else.
It was $8,000 in savings, I think, a year that we're gonna see at least. But I could get those figures for exactly what we've been paying.
I understand this was not implemented by either
Right.
the current interim manager or by Mr. Volvin. This was city manager and council a year or two ago.
I'd like a little bit more information on that. I'm a little concerned with that. I'm not real keen on the idea of composting and putting all that into Volunteer Park, especially when we're trying to develop Volunteer Park a little bit more right now.
Councilmember Kurtzwell?
I don't remember, unless there's somebody on council that can refresh my memory, I don't remember any council approval to use Volunteer Park for a compost for any reason at all.
And I can find that out. I mean, Ron Brock's the one that told me about it when I first got here, that's where they were. Because we were going over the budget, that's one of the things we talked about.
I think council at one time had an interest in doing that, and it met with tremendous opposition by people in the community.
That was brought up as well.
And Lyon Township. And I will be part of that group that will oppose any dumping in Volunteer Park. I mean, if it's going to be farmed, I think that was the balance, is that the gentleman went into Volunteer Park. He cleaned the area out in preparation of development at a cost of about, to his own labor, I would assume that that cost is somewhere between $20,000 and $40,000 to go in and clear land. Whether or not, I mean, you'd have to ask him, but I think that somewhere in there is that range. And he did it in anticipation that the city was going to develop that property. So as he was clearing land, an arrangement was made to allow him to farm it because it was considered an organic matter and was not contributing to junk or anything like that. The problem is when you start dumping is that everybody will be dumping back there. Once it gets out, they will be dumping everything in there. And I think that was one of the biggest. And when you start composting, you are putting spores in the air. And I will tell you, that whole end of Lyon Township was here. Winding Creek, Lyon Trail was here. Everybody on Post Lane, Oak Creek was there, Maple Creek and Hidden Creek. And I'm just letting you know, that is one of the reasons Mike Creamer got involved and ran for city council, was he was part of that group that was going to stop that composting in Volunteer Park. So if that's the road that certain people are on, I'm just letting you know that there will be opposition to it. You know, sometimes you just have to pay the piper.
I'm willing to do whatever you guys decide, so it doesn't matter
But I
either
think
way to me.
that is a accurate recollection of the history of dumping in Volunteer
And that
Park.
was brought up when I talked to Ron, because he said we might be able to do it for a little while, but he said if the gripes come back like they did last time, he said it'll probably get canceled. We left some money in there in anticipation of halfway through the year, if they decided we didn't want to dump there no more, so. But again, I can put the money back in the budget, no problem at all.
Well, I think what you have to do is get a direction from council. I mean, I'm only one person. I can only tell you what my opinion is, and I can tell you what my base is. And my base will be here, and they will fight this. That park is, it doesn't help us in terms of development to go out and recruit money and have developers come and take a look at that park and see it just covered with dumping. Because I'm telling you, it isn't just going to be the leaves.
And I agree, after the meeting we had the other day about, wanting to put something in there, it makes a lot of sense to do that.
If I were a developer, I would be looking at the cost of cleaning up the potentially hazardous contaminated ground that I would have to deal with. So leave it as natural and as organic as you can.
And I think the intent was to just bring the city leaves out there, not all the garbage and stuff, but you're right. Once you get a dumping ground, people are gonna use it as that, so.
Well, you start bringing lawn bags out, you're gonna be bringing fertilizer, you're gonna be bringing weed killer, you're gonna be bringing all of that compost.
Yeah.
But that's
From
just,
my understanding, though, the only thing we were gonna be dumping out there was the actual leaf pickup, not anything else besides that. So if there's compost stuff that's bagged up, I think that was for the, is it GLI to take out? What's that?
GFL would take that.
GFL, yeah.
I think if maybe I don't know, how we should probably put it on the agenda and let everybody else on council have an opportunity for their opinion.
It's fine.
Councilmember Kittle?
I was planning on talking about this at council comments, but since it's sprung from manager's report, this has been just distorted to the point of unrecognizability. The idea of what we were doing for the last, when Bob Martin had decided to pull the plug on taking it over to Lyon Township, literally right across the fence line from the city, and dump it, pay for it, and dump it over there at the Rock Shop or Stone Depot. Yeah. That was to save money. Spurt Industries was the group that was planning on conducting a commercial enterprise composting factory over at Volunteer Park. It was essentially 40 acres worth of composting. They were not bringing it solely locally. It was going to end up being a regional operation. I could easily see the area being alarmed by that. The volume of our own product is just marginal. So the idea that we're creating some biohazard in the park, doing what everybody does that doesn't actually rake their leaves to the curb, just mulching them on their own lawn, I think that we're going to be all right. And Mr. Hamlin, he ended up making the improvements, and the swap was that he didn't pay us a dime to use the park. He got to do it for free, because if we charged, then it became an enterprise that we would have to put out for bid, and all the complications of accounting for the money exchange of leasing that property. So we got the benefit of getting good land balancing. He got the benefit of being able to use that land mass to be able to grow his crops. It was a nice symbiotic relationship. But the idea that the Spurt Industries package has anything to do with the activity that would be conducted with us dumping our leaves there is just absurd. So the idea that that we're just going to turn a blind eye and let people put whatever they want, you're not going to have the public dropping their stuff off. It'll be for your trucks to end up dumping leaves that are collected. So all this garbage that they're talking about tainting that parkland is just fantasy. So,
can we put this on the agenda, Mr. Mayor, for the next meeting for discussion?
Judy, would you go ahead and make a note of that?
And Tim, could I please see the deed to that property to see if there's any restrictions?
I'm not sure I have the deed. I'll have to check with the clerk's office.
Thank you, Judy. Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Kennedy, go ahead.
And I know maybe perhaps as part of the discussion for the leaf issue, Mike, I know that the residents of the city have become well accustomed to leaf pickup at the curb, and yet we pay GFL to haul those leaves away if we put them in bags.
Mm-hmm.
So give us an estimate as to what it actually costs us to pick up the residents' leaves in the boundaries of the city, if you would. I realize we've got city properties that we have to also maintain, but if the residents put their leaves in the bags, GFL would take them away, and we're already paying them to do that.
Can do that.
So if you can give us an estimate as to what the potential savings would be for the labor and the equipment, cost for operating the equipment, et cetera. it may enter into the equation as well.
Does anyone have anything else for the manager's report this evening? Great. Move on to council comments. Councilmember Richards, why don't you kick us off tonight?
Well, 10 minutes after 10, so it appeared up there on this clock. Don't want to stay too long. I thank everyone for being here. I hate being a figure of controversy or whatever, but my 3 pillars of my efforts are damage control, save money, and save the city from a disaster that they might stumble into. And there's a couple of potential disasters right over the city limits line in Lyon Township, which we need to look at, and I should write something up. I've been in touch with other Lyon Township residents, and some of them want me to speak at the township. I don't know. I don't think I want to, but maybe I would. I feel very strongly that a development that's got 10 feet between the houses, right on the city limits borderline, and the corner of 8 Mile and Griswold Road, will be a detriment in the long term to the community. Okay, you're going to have a slum, just like we would have had at Thomasville if we'd approved that in the way it was configured. That would have been a disaster, okay? And that's what I want to alert people to, especially Planning Commission, but I'll have to do it in writing rather than in person. But I'll tackle it, okay? We need to be alert and aware of disasters that are impending. I'm hoping everything else will go well this spring, and the cleanup's coming up next weekend. The 14th. I'll be participating, but I don't know how much good I'm going to be this year. I'll just ride around in the truck with them and show them the spots to clean up. Anyway, thank you very much. That's it.
Councilmember Walton?
Good evening. As you all know, I like to get out and do lots of things around the city, so I'm just going to highlight a few events that are coming up. April 12th, that's this week. Southline Hotel's having Ladies' Night Out. I hope everyone, can get out to that. Looks like the Southline High School is doing Little Shop of Horrors, April 19th through the 22nd. Southline East is doing Mary Poppins, April 26th through 29th. Looking forward to both those plays. I don't know if anybody else has been to some of the high school plays, but they are phenomenal. Southline Library is hosting a shredding event on April 29th from 10 to 2. So if you have documents that need to be shredded and you need secure shredding, this is the date you want to get up there. So those are the things that I'll be doing, and then maybe I'll run into some people, and y'all have a great night. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Walton. Councilmember Kurtzwell, please.
First, I'm going to do some additional research, Mr. Mayor, and it's on a point of parliamentarian procedure. And I just want to bring to your attention that according to Robert's rules, you were correct tonight. Oh. And that is when a motion has been made, basically, and it's placed before the committee, before the organization, there is a rule in here which does permit you to not vote if the matter passes by a majority. The whole point under Robert's rules is to make sure that you remain impartial and neutral on matters. So once the vote reaches, like we did tonight, a majority, under Robert's rules, you were not necessarily required because your vote was not needed to pass the measure. I will be discussing that issue with some other individuals, but my cursory reading of Robert's rules does state that you were absolutely correct. You probably did not need to vote on that matter tonight.
Thank you.
Next, I'd like to thank both the fire chief and the superintendent of water in DPW for sending out an email regarding their absence from the city due to vacation plans. Thank you, gentlemen, for being extremely professional and respectful to council. Your professionalism and how you communicated to council as a body, as to all of us, speaks volumes as to your character and your commitment to public service. That email probably took about 10 seconds to draft and send, but the fact that you treated all of council, not just a couple people, but that you treated all of council with courtesy and professionalism is to be commended. As they say, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, so when the two of you extend that kind of respect to council, as you did in your email, it sends a message, at least to me, that your style of leadership is also an expectation of how you lead your employees to a similar respect of others. So again, gentlemen, I just want to thank you. It's the little things that count, and I think it speaks volumes as to your management skills. Next, I would like to thank everyone that went to the Easter egg hunt. This is what the Kiwanis, and the Kiwanis did a great job. Abe Ayub was just absolutely fabulous. Ashley Onstead, former candidate for mayor, was there flapping her furry ears. And I want to extend an incredible appreciation to the Southland Fire Department. They were exceptional with their volunteers. They were professional, along with Chief Vogel. And a big, big thank you also goes out to the Oakland County Sheriff, Brian, who passed out, which was incredible, sheriff stickers, pencils, and a coloring book entitled Coloring with the Sheriff. Brian got a great response. Our county sheriff definitely did a super job. And I want to thank Sheriff Mike Bouchard for being the leader that he is, not only in his law enforcement agency, but in encouraging volunteerism and community relations among his deputies. Additionally, I also met with several individuals that I believe are going to be joining the Kiwanis. We talked for a little bit, and I believe two of them have already contacted Abe about joining. So when you have a great event like the Easter egg hunt, it's a great recruitment for membership. And I will tell you that the Kiwanis is just a fabulous service organization to join. I'd also like to send out a thank you to Beckway Doors for excellent servicing. The technician who came to repair our garage door last week was Brian, and he did an absolutely fabulous, fabulous job. I think we sometimes forget that we have these little, smaller, local businesses that are right here in town that you can go locally, and I'm telling you, the service we got from Beckway Doors was absolutely fabulous. Within 24 hours of making that phone call, they were there. So Beckway Doors is located on Lake Street, right next to Peter's True Value, which we all know has the post out in the parking lot for veterans. Last, I'd like to thank our citizen number one, Ryan Lair. I don't know if people know this or not, but I had a animal that needed surgery, and Ryan Lair, citizen number one, is one of those pet angels, and he gives people like I got a toy and a little cross in there for prayers for the recovery of my furry animal, and all he asks is that I package them up when my pet heals and to give them back to him so that he can take them on to the next individual that has a pet that may need a little bit of comfort. I just think that this is just an example of the incredible human spirit that we have in our city, that somebody would actually think about doing this for somebody else. So, citizen number one, thank you for being the incredible individual that you are. I know I appreciate you, and I'm sure a lot of other people do too. So, good night, everybody. Thank you for inviting us into your homes this evening for the City Council meeting, and we'll see you in the next couple of weeks. Have a great week. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Kurtzwell. Councilmember Kennedy, please.
Well, I just had the opportunity to attend the Chamber of Commerce networking breakfast. It was hosted at the Salem South Lyon District Library a week or so ago. We had a chance to meet the owners of a number of local businesses as they explained what their businesses do and the services they can provide. It was a very worthwhile and beneficial opportunity to meet a number of the local entrepreneurs, if you will. I want to thank Donna and Kathy in particular for putting the event on and hosting the breakfast and actually preparing everything. Other than that, I want to thank everybody for tuning in today, and that's all I have.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Parisian?
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you. Councilmember Kill?
That's pretty much my sentiment. I think we've said enough.
Yep. I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
I second.
All in favor?
Bye.
Aye.
Have a great night, everybody.